committed in doing what is right, reasonable, and sustainable regarding these minimum wage negotiations. We therefore make this passionate appeal once again to the labor unions to reciprocate this gesture in the interest of this nation. The AGF has given what the federal government position is, but at this point, what is important for all of us as Nigerians is to come together. We believe that this labor movement also means well for Nigerians. After all, the negotiation they are doing, according to them, is also on behalf of Nigerians.
Peace and progress of this country, I plead with the labor union that they should reconsider and come back to the negotiating table, because I believe that we have duties, both the labor union, non-organized, private sector, and of course government side, to come to conclusion, because we can't allow our nation to get into crisis.
All right, so that's the part of the meeting that was held yesterday. But there was a letter, a resolution reached at the meeting between the federal government and the organized labor, which was held Monday yesterday. So part of it reads, further to the negotiation by the Tripartite Committee on National Minimum Wage and subsequent withdrawal of labor from negotiation, the leadership of the National Assembly intervened on 2nd June 2024. The organized labor declared nationwide strike on Monday, 3rd June 2024 to drive home its demands. 2, the federal government, in the national interest, convened a meeting with labor held in the office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation on Monday, 3rd June, with a view to ending the strike action. After exhaustive deliberation and engagement by both parties, the following resolutions were reached. 1, the President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Federal Republic of Nigeria, is committed to a national minimum wage that is higher than 60,000 naira. 2, arising from the above, the Tripartite Committee, it says, is to meet every day for the next 1 week with a view to arriving at an agreeable national minimum wage. 3, Labor, in deference to the high esteem of the President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, the Federal Republic of Nigeria's commitment in 2 above, undertakes to convene, the letter says here, a meeting of its organs immediately to consider this commitment, and 4, no worker will be victimized as a result of the industrial action done in Abuja on 3rd of June 2024. So the signatories here for the federal government is Mohammed Idris, Minister of Information and National Orientation; 2, Honorable Nkiruka Onyejocha, Minister of State for Labor and Employment; 4, Organized Labor, Joe Ajiero, President, Nigeria Labour Congress; Festus Osifo, President, Trade Union Congress. So to talk us through this and help us understand what this actually means, we've got former President of Trade Union Congress, Peter Esele, and also former President of Pengerson. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on the program today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Okay,
so seeing this already, there are different interpretations with the way the headlines came through. Some say Labour FG reach agreement. Some then say Labour FG, what? Not sure if it's a deadlock or what to expect. But at the moment now, from your, being a Labour person yourself, having led the union several times, what does this mean?
Yeah, what it meant is that, of course, there was no negotiation. They've not been talking. So once the strike starts, after Labour have given an ultimatum and nothing had happened, so what Labour decided to do was to go on strike. So in the process of the strike, they had a meeting. So now what has been agreed is that both parties have agreed to go back to the table and continue conversation or continue negotiation. That's one. The second aspect of it is that both President of NSC and TUC didn't have the mandate to call off a strike. So once they don't have the mandate to call off a strike, whatever report or whatever the federal government may have discuss with them, both formally and informally, they will not have to present it to the organs. And the organ that is saddled with this responsibility is one, the Central Working Committee, which also is now is subsumed in the National Executive Council. So if the entire body of the National Executive Council is not available, then the Central Working Committee will make that decision. So whatever decision that was discussed formally and informally between the federal government and the leaders of organized labor will now have to go to the National Executive Council, and a decision will be reached whether to continue the strike or whether to call off the strike.
So, for instance, when you have these kinds of meetings, I mean, both persons, when media is not in there, they come to some sort of decision, which in some cases, I mean, for instance, when this letter has now been written, do we take for granted that for Labour to have gotten to this stage, they're going to go back and just fulfill formality of going through their processes and then say, okay, you know what, we'll call or suspend the strike, especially when in now that clause where it says deferring to the president? I say, what?
Yeah, first thing is, of course, Labour will have to show respect for the office of the president. But whether they are going to call it off or they are going to continue has to depend upon the commitment that they've had. So if the commitment is strong enough, it will be a decision of the National Executive Council to take. Actually, this strike is what I would call, this is a nuclear option strike. When I use the word a nuclear option, is that this is the last resort. And it comes as a result of frustration, not being taken seriously. And then the leadership has also been taking a lot of bashing, both from the street and from its members. And therefore, normally when you want to go on a strike, the National Executive Council would confer the powers on the president and the general secretary, that whatever you see and you can make whatever judgment that you deem fit, you have our permission to do that. But in this case, both president and general secretary don't have the powers. So what the NEC decided is that president and general secretary come back and report to us. And when decisions such as these are made by the National Executive Council, you are going to have almost 100% compliance. You can imagine that the notice of strike came out over the weekend. And on Monday, it was so effective. It was carried out by over 50 affiliate unions to both NSC and TUC. So when you have that rapid response coming from the unions about a strike, you will know that everybody is angry and there's frustration and there is lack of, they believe that government is not taking them serious, and therefore they need to do something that will not only be that will not just damage it, that will be beneficial to the image of the union. Because over the years, I think the union have been taking bashing from even Nigerians who just believe that whenever they call for a strike, and then before the strike, they will even call it off. So this was just what I would call, whatever will happen, let it happen. We just have to go do it once and for all. So the NEC will make that decision whether to go on or not to go on. But it has to be whatever commitment that they have gotten from the federal government.
So since there's a clause there that says in deference to the president, is it wrong or what, off to expect that they could also have a rapid response to the resolution or whatever decision they were going to take?
Yes, they will. Because once you have the National Executive Council members at the sitting, whatever is taken, a memo is issued and a press conference is done, and then whatever decision that is taken, whether to continue, whether to end the strike, is instantaneous.
So how long does that normally take?
Such meetings don't take too long because it's a one-item agenda and it's more of an emergency meeting. Depending on the commitment they get from the president. If the commitment is such that is taken seriously, then you are going to have the Central Working Committee, which is headed by the president. The National Executive Council is also headed by the president. So they will be the one to make the case on the floor of the NEC. So if the president and general secretary are okay with it and they make the presentation on the floor of the NEC, then it's easier for it to sail. If the president is not okay with the commitment they've gotten from the federal government, then you know you are in for a long haul.
What do you say to this school of thought that says, well, Labour could actually have called that, or if they could call it emergency meeting of their NEC or union last night, especially when it was supposed to be in deference to the president, but They also thought, okay, maybe just felt, you know what, yeah, let's do that much later today so that at least the impact of this strike will not be for nothing. So we'll do that much later today. Would that be right for those who think that?
No. There's no way Labour would have gone ahead and say, let's have that meeting. The only reason Labour would have had that meeting last night if the president had come, the federal government has come and said, okay, we are paying you the 491,000. Then instantly the president and the general secretary can do a press conference no matter how late, and they will not get the NEC involved. They can go ahead and make that announcement and say, okay, fine, this is what we demanded. The government have granted it, so there's no need for me to come back to you. So based on that, then we can go ahead and announce the suspension of the strike. But if you are talking about them having this money, they have to do the meetings, because what you have is when a strike of this magnitude is going on, you are going to have the entire members of the Central Working Committee in Abuja. So the Central Working Committee will be in Abuja, and you don't expect them to go ahead and have that meeting past midnight. But then it has to do with the commitment they've gotten from the president, and that commitment is what will determine how the NEC goes. Because this is not an action that NSA and TUC carries out every other day. They've called for several strikes, but you don't have strikes of this magnitude, because this is a nuclear option. They know the damage, they know the effect, they know the impact it will create. So it's always something that they have in their toolbox that they hardly and rarely use, except when they are frustrated, annoyed, and I just can't. It's something that shouldn't have happened.
Mr. Esele, I mean, you say it's something that happens not so when they're frustrated. They seem to be frustrated a lot. I can't think of a time when we had maybe 6 months without some sort of industrial action or some sort of protest, whether it is from ASU or from the NLC or whether it is from the TUC or it's got to do with petrol. But I want to be able to talk to you a little bit about this agreement that was signed. What is this? What is over 60,000 naira? What does that mean? Because from some people who are looking at that, they're like, well, what sort of agreement is this? What does it entail? Is there some kind of commitment? Unless, of course, from a labor man's perspective, you can tell us that there's more to this agreement. Maybe not all of it is coming out because they need to discuss some of the other things that have been negotiated with the organs. Is that the sense that we're getting from here?
Yes. There will be more to that over 60,000 naira. Of course, they are not going to make that public. They have to take it to the National Executive Council. Because if you make that public, you have certain groups of people in a strike action like this. You have those who are for, genuinely. You have those who are against. And then you also have those we call the fifth columnists who want to take advantage of a strike of this magnitude. You also have those who don't like the government. You also have those who don't like the labor leaders. So what you need to do in situations like this is to keep everything under wrap and be able to manage it. Because when you come in front of the media, certain things are lost. You know, what you have playing out is that you now have ego setting in. And once you have ego setting in, negotiation actually becomes very difficult. So when the president make a commitment to say over 60,000 naira, which means there is more to it. But you and I also know that Labour is not going to stand or sit on the fact that they want to be paid 491,000. So Labour is going to have to move its positions, and the federal government also need to move its positions. You know, because so that both parties need to identify what we call a mutual interest. Labour doesn't want anarchy. Labour doesn't want chaos. What Labour wants to do is to pressure the government to do what is good for Nigerians.
I mean, I wanted to be able to get you on that because some of the feelers that we got yesterday was that Labour was not going to back down on anything less than a six-figure salary as minimum wage in Nigeria, considering the economic situation of the country. But I wanted to be able to get your thoughts on what the government thinks about this increase that is being requested for over 400,000. We're hearing from the federal government that could actually be counterproductive to national growth and development, talking about how people will not be able to pay that. If you compel people to pay over 20% increase, over 20 times rather, not 20% increase, over 20 times the current pay, that you're basically going to shut down businesses, people are going to lose their jobs. It could be counterproductive to the economy. As someone from Labour, what do you think of that assertion from the federal government?
Yes, of course, that's the line that federal government will always give you, that they'll give you all kind of stories why it cannot be paid. But I'll share a story that I've also shared on some interviews that I've had. Is I use a driver and his boss. A driver earns about 80,000 naira a month as a salary. And then the boss decided that, okay, it gives him a free accommodation, which is a one-room self-contained. And then he stays in that one-room self-contained. His salary is 80,000. He's not paying for that. And then invariably, the transportation is also taken off, so he doesn't need to board a taxi or take a bus to get to his place of residence. And then the same, his employer also goes ahead and say, okay, fine. Because you live in my residence, what I'll do is that I guarantee you two meals a day. And we value those 2 meals at 2,000, let's say 2,000 or 3,000 for 2 meals because of the cost of living, let's say 3,000. And this driver works 6 times a week, and you multiply 6 by 4, that is 24, and you multiply it by 3,000. That is an extra 12 years, 12 times 6. You have 12,000 naira. It collects 18,000 naira a week. So 18,000 naira times 4 comes to about 72,000 naira. Now, let's assume his accommodation is 20,000. That's 95. His salary is 80,000. That's 175,000 naira. So the actual cash that goes to the driver is 80,000 naira. The other extras around it is about 95,000 naira. So is the person not paying 175,000 naira already? Is that driver going to stop his boss from going to work? No, he won't do that. So when the federal government is talking about we can't pay X amount of money, the difference is that because it's failure of governance, not just in this administration is about a 1-year-old, it's failure of governance from previous administration, and this administration is not also doing anything to now set it in motion that, no, this is not how we're going to operate.
But I hear what you're saying, but I want to be able to get your answer on that. If we're compelling people to pay times 20, from the private sector, and I'm going to get to that question in a bit. If we start to, say, look, times 20 of what they're able to pay right now, both in the public and in the private sector, we're not going to compel, I would have to compel my boss to pay times 20 of what he's paying me right now, just so we can all be on the same page. Wouldn't that lead to the closure of a lot of businesses? That is the assertion of the federal government. Is that something you think about?
Please don't forget that what we are talking about is minimum wage. It's the baseline for what you pay. We are not talking about what you are going to pay. Now, I will also tell you that there are a lot of people that are earning more than 60,000 naira a month. There are so many people earning more than 60,000 naira a month. But what Labour is talking about, let's have a base. Let's have a living wage. Let's have a wage that we know will take us home. I will ask you, I'm somebody that like hands-on and then also talk from experience. One of the things I'll ask, go to the market today. I also share a story of my wife. My wife came to me and said she doesn't understand why every month the cost of running this home is increasing. I also said, I feel the same way and I'm worried about it. And then she decided that she was going to go to the market herself. Probably she was thinking that our domestic staff who are responsible for that maybe doing some under-the-table deals. So she decided to go to the market herself. And when she came back, she couldn't sleep that night and she was furious because of the cost of living. And the next thing we started asking ourselves is, how are other people surviving? So this is why you have a government. Government is supposed to get the feedback from the people and also not decide how do we mitigate the challenges that these people are facing. That is why you have a government. But most times, the problem we have is that over the years, we major in the minor and minor in the major. And when you have that, everything becomes ad hoc and policies become flip-flop. So once you have that, it will not even help businesses. Businesses need a stable environment.
I mean, I want to be able to, sorry to cut in there, but that's another issue people are having with these negotiations that Labour is having with the federal government, that the private sector is not part of this. States are not a part of these conversations. So while all of this is going on, we have till today states that are having issues paying 30,000 naira minimum wage. You've doubled it to 60. They're looking at you silently. And then you're asking for more. And they're still very silent. Is this going to be a situation where all of this happens and then we're going to have a situation where governors tell you straight up, I have no money to pay this. I have other things to do and we cannot afford this. And of course, that engagement with the private sector as well. How many businesses in the private sector will be able to afford this increment in minimum wage?
That's not true. Governors are part of it. The governors forum are part of this negotiation that is going on. Governors are part and parcel of it. I'll give you an example. The state governor increased to 70,000. Enugu also increased to about 70,000, and Enugu state governor also made a commitment that they have teams who are part of this negotiation, and whatever is agreed at the negotiation at the end of the day, they're also willing to pay. So when we also talk about OPTS, it's called tripartite because it's organized labor, the government, and the employers. And the employers are the OPTS. So organized private sectors are also there. They are all part of this negotiation. If you look at the 60,000 naira that was initially proposed by the federal government, and the agreement that came out was that both federal government and organized private sector have agreed that this is what they can pay. And to be fair and to be frank, there are a lot of people in the organized private sector that has moved on far beyond what the federal government is even doing. I know of a lot of these organized private sector, NECA is their main body. And I know how far a lot of them have gone. Immediately, subsidy was taken out, and federal government also went to do currency float. So they are all part and parcel of it. But I still believe that both the union and the federal government will come to an agreement that will be mutually beneficial to the economy and to the well-being of Nigerians.
Well, I mean, Labour has said today that the strike continues until they hear from their organs. So I think that's the natural thing. It's not that there's anything out of place, just that people are expecting, now that you quote unquote have signed those documents with the federal government, people expect them to then suspend it or call it off, whatever the term they want to use, get back to the negotiating table. But that clause, that last clause there that says no worker will be victimized as a result of this strike, that, to a lot of people, they interpret it as though, okay, well, we're going to come back, but let's just go back, let our unions do what they usually do, then we'll suspend it and get back to the table. Perhaps, probably, because FG had said at some point, too, that this strike is illegal. They maintain that it was illegal, so Labour trying to get some sort of assurances that, yeah, you may have said it's illegal, but nobody will be victimized. Will those assessments be right?
Yes. One of the things that you will do is to make sure that you dot all the I's and you cross all the T's. That's what Labour will do. And one of the things is to make sure that nobody is victimized at the end of the day. Everybody has the right to withdraw their services. What Labour have done is to withdraw their services. And I don't think any court can deliver a judgment against that you don't have a right to withdraw your services. So first thing is that when a lot of people are talking about likely what Labour is going to do, Labour has a process. So those processes will be followed. There are processes that led to this strike. The process was the National Executive Council met and decided that let's give federal government ultimatum. And then the meaning of ultimatum actually is please, let's talk. People don't understand that when you give ultimatum, it's an opportunity for us to continue to dialogue. In the process of that ultimatum, you don't get what they are expecting to get, and then the strike will not go on. So what played out was that Labour felt government just didn't care, and therefore they had to go on this strike. And then now, for Labour to also pull back, if they want to, they also have to go back to the organ that authorized the strike, and that is the National Executive Council. And that organ will be meeting today. Is that same organ that will determine whether the strike goes on or whether we call it a day.
So how do you enter into a negotiation and you place an ultimatum on the end of it? It's like a sort of Damocles. So the other party will feel, wait a minute, it's supposed to be a neutral negotiation. So if you're giving me a deadline, you're trying to twist me and compel me under duress to have some sort of agreement.
Yeah, because what Labour is doing is that Labour is following modus operandi, which of course is that don't forget that this negotiation started since October. So you've had a negotiation going on since October, and then there was no ultimatum. Nobody was threatening. Nobody was trying to tie anybody. But the negotiation, the way it was going, they were not taking. Labour's position is that government was not taking them seriously. Therefore, they now decided that, okay, fine, let's move to the next level, is let's issue an ultimatum that we either come to an agreement or we go on strike, because we are not making senses here and then we are wasting our time. Yeah, but that was why Labour gave that ultimatum. But you can also look at how Labour also bent backwards. They are on strike, but they also decided that we need to talk. Because one of the templates for negotiation is that no matter what, you must never break the table.
But the thing about that too is that, I mean, everybody saw that statement from State House, 1st of October last year, of 35,000 naira wage award. So it's not that government themselves didn't do anything to move the needle, and Labour themselves, from that notice that was signed by the Minister of Information, Madam Mohammed Idris, Labour persons were also aware and there when these agreements were done. So is it that, yes, they allow them to give the wage award all you want, it doesn't matter, we're still asking for what we're asking for?
Yes, the 35,000 wage award was for a period of time. It was not cast in stone. That's one. Then number two, you also remember that 35,000 wage award was also, there was schism between TUC and NSC. I can tell you authoritatively that part of that schism was one part feeling that, okay, government has moved the needle, so let's find a way to go back to the table. And then you notice that strike was not as effective, was not as decisive, because within the Labour rank and file is also Labour don't think that they are led by people who don't know how things work. No, what they decided to do was that they also have disagreement among themselves. We do, even when I was president, there's always a huge debate. And it's very rare for you to have this almost 100% agreement coming to the fore. It's very rare. And that was why when that strike was called over the 35,000 wage award, there was issues left, right, and center. And the strike, before the strike took off, you had the NSC president actually calling it off. And there was need for people to talk to both labor centers on the need for them to work together. And then for you to now have this is that they are both in sync and they are both not happy with how they have been handled by the government.
Well, at the moment, when you were president, there was that time when the president also intervened in this matter. So what scenario played out? Was it that the committee that was handling that negotiation, did they not have the authority of the president? Why did the president have to intervene? If you could just perhaps juxtapose it with the current scenario where you have a tripartite committee and then it came across as though they were not getting across to Labour until it had to be in deference to the president, meaning some intervention from number one.
That's the biggest challenge that you face as president of NSC and president of TUC, is that most times you find out that government comes with what we call their second or third level. I'm using soccer terms, football terms now, is that you are talking to people and you find out that they just don't have the mandate. But if the NSC president and the TUC president is seated, they have the mandate. When I was there, I have the mandate. So you find out that at the end of the day, a minister can be overruled by the office of the secretary to the government of the federation. Sometimes it's even better for you to have the chief of staff to the president in a meeting than for you to have a minister for labor in a meeting. So one thing is that Labour understands all of this and knows that, do you have the mandate, do you have the authority for us to have a discussion and bring this to a closure? I'll give an example. When we had the minimum wage negotiation, we now agreed for 18,000 naira minimum wage. And how did we come to that? The informal sector, the OPTS, everybody was part of it. Even later, governors who were part of it also later denied it. But what was our strength was that the chairman of that meeting was the former Chief Justice of the Federation, Chief Justice Begore. And we know that Chief Justice Begore is a member of the National Council of State. So that in itself comes with its own gravitas. And we know where this decision will be made, which is the National Council of State. The Chief Justice Begore will be there. And that itself was about 20 or 30%. And when he actually attended that meeting, and when he came to give us a report, we now told him that was one of the reasons why we allowed him to lead us, because we knew he would be able to stand on whatever we've agreed. But in this case, when you have a minister who will not be a member of council, who is not a member of the National Council of State, and where decisions are being made, so what you have is that the confidence of both president and general secretary will be weakened, and they will be looking forward to having number one, or at the very least, number two, and then or the SGF, because the SGF will always interface with the president. But below that, you find out that most ministers don't really have the gravitas to make things happen. I'm sorry to say.
What about the Minister of Labour?
From my experience, the Minister of Labour is... no, the Minister of Labour can't. In situations like this, because the Minister of Labour cannot really have a mandate. It's like dealing with if you are dealing with, let's take, for example, a company. You are dealing with a company, you have industrial relations officer, and then you have an HRO director. And then you have GM HRO. So what you have is that if you have an HRO director, he has a direct access to the MD, CEO of the company. So all the others will report to the HRO director. So everybody will look forward to having the HRO director, or at the very least, the GM HRO, because those have direct access to the MD, CEO. So in this case, workers will be more comfortable. It's either you have the SGF or you have the vice president. Then if you have the president, all well and good. But if you cannot have those, but the ministers and the way it is structured in our climate, it's very difficult for the Minister of Labour to actually be the one to close the negotiation.
That's interesting. Well, as my colleagues have highlighted, I mean, today persons living with disability are holding a peaceful protest against this industrial action called by Labour. We had that of Nigeria Medical Association saying, nope, we're going to work. We're not part of this industrial action. In addition to that, we saw images of several offices who were telling Labour, don't shut down our property. This is private property. You cannot shut it down. We pay our bills, our dues from your state to different states in the country. In addition to that, you also have some Nigerians who question, why would Labour shut down the national grid? So at this point, the grand soul of opinion may just be going against Labour, who themselves have equally got to be careful so that you don't lose the people who are supposed to be on your side for the strike.
Now, we are in a democracy. The people with disability have a right to protest. They have a right to protest against anyone. If they want to protest against Labour, they have a right to protest against Labour. There's nothing wrong with that. They are expressing themselves in accordance with the Constitution of the Federal Republic. So I don't think Labour has any problem with that. And then the Nigerian Medical Association, I think they should work. So if you have anybody in a strike like this, you can also have some people who are overzealous, yes. But I don't think the National Executive Council will want NMA to shut down. No, I don't think they will want that. And at no time have we ever encouraged doing their own. If NMA decide to go on strike, the TUC and NSC don't join NMA to do their strike.
I mean, I want to be, you've not really answered. There's a particular action that was taken that in many ways, like Chamberlain said, could boomerang, make people not, like Labour anymore. And that is the shutting down of the national grid. That particular action is one that, you could have done this without having to shut down the national grid, surely. But, it actually leads me to what my actual question is. When it comes to asking the government for something, you want something, we all sympathize, everyone agrees with Labour on the need for an increment in the minimum wage. It is ridiculous out there. But is there a way to get what you need without punishing Nigerians? Because in many ways, you were talking about your wife earlier, it does feel a little bit like you're punishing me. It's not me that is holding back your minimum wage. Is there no way you can direct, or is that the only way to get government to act, to punish the citizens?
But if you use that word of saying citizens have been punished, I don't think I will agree with you. As I'm talking to you now,
what word would you use?
Let me say something.
What word would you use if you shut down the national grid? I feel like you're punishing me.
No. They withdrew their services. They have a right to withdraw their services. No, they have a right to withdraw their services. That's what. Let's not treat the symptoms. Let's look at the causes. Because if you take it that way, I'm talking to you now. I'm using generator. The power I'm using talking to you, I'm using generator. Sometimes those are some of the sacrifices that has to be paid. Now, if government earlier on, when in your opening statement you stated the fact that for Labour to have gone this far, government treated them with government just didn't care. So they had to go this hog because they feel government did not care. If this negotiation was closed in December, are you telling me that they'll go ahead and shut the national grid? So I think this is not the intention of organized labor to punish Nigerians, not at all. There is the fact that government, please listen to us. Things are difficult, and let's take care of the basics. And sometimes you and I are collateral damage at the end of the day. I was supposed to travel yesterday. I couldn't travel. I have a couple of friends who were coming into the country yesterday. Somebody actually reached me from Marrakesh. She was flying in, and I had to tell the person, please don't come in yet. Just hold on. Maybe from Wednesday you can now reschedule your flight. So a lot of these things happen, but we need to tell ourselves that we need to be a society that is process driven.
But Mr. Esele, aren't they two different things from what Kela is saying? Because if you're withdrawing your services, for instance, if Kela is leaving the studio, the lights are on, you leave the studio, don't switch it off. But if you're shutting it down and then leaving the studio, two different things there.
Yes, because one of the factors is that how do I make you listen to me?
So that's the thing.
So we were correct then. We were correct. Yes. The only way that you can get the government to do what the people want, to get the government to do what you want, is to pinch its citizens. That means we were correct. Is there no other way? Is there no other way to do this?
Everybody is being pinched right now. That's one of the things. But again, for any change in society to happen, there are some sacrifices that have to be paid. Now, you are not talking about the various reforms that have taken place in this government. Even if you read the 48 laws of power, I think it's law 45, says that you carry out reforms. You don't carry out reforms every now and again. Now you are reforming the electricity, the energy sector. Now you took away subsidy. You float currency. So what the citizens have been getting, bass. Are you also now saying that the government have been punishing the citizens? I'm also asking you that. Will you say the government has been punishing the citizens? But the government is telling us that these are policies that they think in the long run will be good for Nigerians. And so the trade union, the NSC and TUC will also tell you that this action they are taking are something that will be beneficial for Nigerians in future. If you can use the word punishment, if you can use the word punishment for subsidy removal, if you can use the word punishment for over 100% increase in electricity tariff, if you can use the word punishment for the floating of naira to dollar from less than 500 naira to by 1,400, if you cannot use the word punishment, then why are you using the word punishment for what Labour is doing?
So here's the thing, Mr. Esele.
I just want us to be fair so that we use the right word.
So, but there are several perspectives to this, because many also talk about saying, listen, in the first instance, how many of us are working in government to benefit from this that Labour is asking? After all, over the years, most, if not all, of these agreements that Labour has agreed over time, how many states are paying in the first place? How many organizations can afford it? But about this particular grid, shutting down of this grid, there are several people who may be watching saying, look, listen, if anyone wanted to deal with this country, maybe there's war or something, if Labour can shut this down, it means other people can also take advantage, go in, shut it down. That's an implication. Aren't we looking at that angle as well? Isn't this economic sabotage?
Now, you just said something. You just said something about how many people are enjoying the minimum wage. I'll give you an example. As a former president of TUC, I don't think any member of TUC earns this minimum wage. No. They all earn far above that. And I can tell you now that majority of people in the informal sector are benefiting from the national minimum wage of 18,000 and also to a national minimum wage of 30,000. If you go to a lot of these gas station where you ask them how much are they earning, you find out that this minimum wage you are talking about in the long run benefits everyone. And let's also know that when you want to grow your economy, it is the disposable income that grows the economy. It is the buying and selling that makes the economy thrive. So when you also go ahead and you now put more money in the pocket of the Nigerian worker, what you have done is that you stimulated the economy. That's also what Nigerian workers are also asking about. And the issue you are talking about, whether this can be an economic sabotage or no economic sabotage, I think Labour also factor all of that in. And that may also likely be what is going to come out of this National Executive Council meeting today. This electricity is going to be, that will be top of it, because I know how these things operate, and I also have an idea of the area they are also going to talk about. They are not, Labour, for one, is not interested in causing chaos and anarchy. Everything needs to be done to make sure that this country move forward, and whatever action that will be taken is mutually beneficial. But we also need to talk to the government. The government also need to give an optics that, okay, we are walking this road together. A lot of people don't ask that question, why Labour will be so upset about it. Is that you look at the government, you wonder if we are living in the same country. You're spending 19 billion naira for something that is private. Your service or worship of God is your private business. You are spending 90 billion naira for Hajj. Some people are buying SUVs, National Assembly in this economy.
Mr. Esele, how do we move that money? You know, we hear this quite a lot. The cost of governance. There's so much wastage. How do we focus? Can labor in any way focus on getting them to stop these wastages and move the money towards the increments in minimum wage? Is there a way that you can hone in on that? Because we hear it all the time. The money that they spend on this is so much. We can channel it, but it's all suggestions. Is there a way you can compel them to do that so that we can get this over with? It's been going on for so long, over and over again, the same record. We're tired of hearing it. Is there a way that labor can hone in on the people who are wasting the money and get them to stop doing that?
But again, it's not only for labor to do it.
We're not saying only labor. No, we're not saying only labor. How can labor help?
Excuse me. No, the media is number one. It's the responsibility of the media as the fourth estate of the realm to investigate the spending. It's the media's responsibility to look at the budget. You see, one of the things that we all do is that we divide this country in bits. So everybody wants to get his own share. A political office holder wants to get his own share. Then labor is talking about his own minimum wage. Then the media is also thinking of how do we get adverts if we go ahead and attack government.
No, wait, let me finish. Please let me finish. Let me respond to that.
Please let me finish.
We do our bit. Hold on a second. No, hold on a second.
Yes.
We asked you about your part of the responsibility and you're basically blaming others. It's a trick.
No.
What's your part? In what way can you do what you need to do to help? Because the media does its bit. So what can you do on your part? Not what are other people doing. What can you do?
You see, one of the things that we were taught in school is that once somebody becomes defensive, that means you hit a raw nerve, and that means you are telling the person the truth. But
what can you do? Answer the question.
Yes. Okay. Okay, let me tell you what Labour is doing right now.
Yes.
What Labour is doing right now is that Labour made 22. They have a charter of demand, which was about 22 items they made to the federal government. These were all part of it. Now, Labour is also talking about the fact that if you don't go ahead to do all of this, they are going to go ahead and go on strike. This strike you are looking at now, this is an opportunity for Labour to have that one-on-one with the president and also bring this to the president's attention. Now, that is what Labour is doing. We are all talking about Labour now. Were we talking about this in October? No. Were we talking about this in November? No. Majorly, what Labour does is behind the scene. When you have crises like this, you know that things are falling, things fall apart, and the center is not holding. Apologies to Chino Achebe. So Labour is doing its own bit. So we all need to also do our own bit. We need to look at the budget.
We're winding down
It's our responsibility to make Nigeria work.
So here's the thing, Mr. Esele. Assuming probably the government agrees to maybe 200, 300,000 naira, 150,000 naira, whatever they agree to, that is maybe close to what Labour wants. You have too much money in circulation. The cost of production is not improved. Availability of food is not affected by all of those things. The cost of transportation is not affected. So this, many have also suggested, you just have inflation, because you still have several indices that are out there that still don't add up. Those mechanisms are not in place. So solution, they say, is not even really in increasing this minimum wage, which Labour is asking for.
Now, you heard me use the driver analogy. Why I use that driver analogy is that cash is not everything. You see, the only reason why over the years Labour is talking about, a sector of Labour is talking about cash is because things, they don't have any other means that they can feel the effect of government. Let's take, for example, I've worked in the private sector all my life. So when they talk about what government is doing, sometimes I'm asking myself and I'm wondering, sometimes I wonder, are we really in the same country? Why I'm asking that is that, okay, my employer, for example, if my wife is pregnant, I don't even need to think about it. My employer takes care of that. If I'm not feeling fine, my employers take care of that. So if that too, you can put it on Naira and Kobo. And if I'm talking about my accommodation where I want to live, my employer subsidize it, except I decide that, okay, I want to live on a high priority. So these are the things I'm talking about. So government cannot, we don't need to look at cash. You first of all, that's why I talked about looking at the causes. Our attention should not be on the symptom. The 491 is actually the symptom, it's not the cause. It's for government to look at, okay, how do we do this heavy lifting for the workers? If you do all of that, nobody is going to come and ask you to pay 200,000. No. If you give me 300,000 at the end and I can't do anything with 300,000, of what benefit it is? I would prefer you give me my 100,000 and my children can go to school and my healthcare is taken care of.
But we also do know, we need to wrap up now. We also do know that Labour has been protesting for decades, but ever since then, the government hasn't built one refinery, which I know Labour had made that part of the agreement in time past. So several scenarios that have not been fulfilled. But unfortunately, well, we'll talk for a bit though. So we do appreciate you talking to us this morning, Peter Esele, former president of TUC and Pengerton.
Thank you for having me.